Welcome back. So here, what we're looking at is a wide data frame. So I'm doing a little something different just so that you can see how this can be transformed to answer certain questions. So this is a wide data format, and some individuals in the R community will call this a tidy. This is in tidy format, in that our observations are our rows. So we have observations as week 1, week 2, week 3, and then we're measuring, let's say, the amount of product A, the amount of product B for each corresponding week. Now let's say you actually want to compare product A versus sorry, my apologies. Let's say you're trying to compare product A versus product B with respect to the week. So at this current moment, our data is not in the right format for us to be able to do this. Okay, again, this is the wide format or the tidy format. The best way what we can do to actually be able to compare product A versus product B with respect to time is to turn it into the long format. Okay, the long format. And so this is what the long format actually looks like, where our rows are no longer each observation. However, this time each row represents a particular quantity. Okay, so you have one row, week 1, product A, 100, row 2, product week 1, product B, 80, so on and so forth. And now we can group by week as well as product to see the average quantity, for example. So that would be a reason on why we would want to actually change the format. So let's look at another example. So let's say we're looking at different individuals in their, this is Olympic season. We're looking at different individuals in terms of their performance on each of the trials of the 100 meter. So John Doe, Jane Doe, Alex Johnson. Okay, so again, this is wide format because each row represents an observation, right? An individual, right? And I would want to make it long so that I can actually compare the actual event with regards to the person. And so what I can do, also find what's the average time for John across all 3 events, okay? So on and so forth. And so what it will look like, the long format will look something like this. Okay, so this is John Doe, this is the event. I can make this wider so you can see more. And then this is the corresponding time. So I can group by event to then see event and name to see the actual average time. Okay, so that's long, going from wide to long. Okay, but what I could also do is go long to wide. So what would that look like? This is another example below. Okay, and this is a long format in that we'll have the employer IDs, we have the department that they belong to and their salary. And let's say we want to find a relationship between HR and IT. Okay, so what I can do is convert this long data frame, okay, where as you can see each of the values, each of the rows represents just a value, okay. This person's making a lot of money. Okay, and then I can then look at convert it into the wide format so that can be in the following orientation. Okay, so then I can compare HR versus IT, for example. All right, I can create a scatter plot at least. All right, whereas in this format you couldn't do that. Okay, let's see one more example, and then we'll get to the coding. This is actually very similar to the previous example. The only thing that's different is that I have an additional variable semester. So I have student ID, subject, and their corresponding score, and I'm going to convert this into the wide format, and it's going to look like this, where each row will represent an individual observation. And so here I would want to be able to look at the relationship between math and science, for example. Very similar. Okay, but now this time I have an additional column variable for the actual semester. Okay. Well, let's move on to, you know what's called R. Okay, so we're in the R version. At least we're in R now. All right, so I'm gonna close this. Okay, and I'm gonna run this. So we need tidyr. We're gonna have to use tidyr to utilize pivot longer and pivot wider. So let's go ahead and run that right there. All right, and so those are the packages, and this is the little GIF, the GIF that tells us what's really happening. Let's look at it for a moment. So this is where it's wide, and what it does is you have your key and your value pairs, and then you turn your key value into now columns. Okay, again, it's the wide, and then here are you're going to pivot longer, key in your values, as well as your IDs. Okay, sorry, and you can see the code for that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it ourselves. Okay, so I already brought in the data frame from what I showed you on Excel. So you have week, you have product A, you have product B, and this code is actually pretty straightforward. So what I mean by that is that I'm gonna run this. We have week data frame. Probably should have called it wide, but whatever. I'm gonna now create long week df by looking at week underscore df and piping it into pivot longer or wider. Hopefully you said pivot longer because that was in the tidy format. Pivot longer. Okay. And so here I'm going to say names to, so we're going to say product. I'll put this in quotations. Products. It should be product. My apologies. It should be product. And then the values. Okay, values. To, and then you can say, let's say this is cost. I don't know. Okay. Let's go ahead and run this. Being told, I think that I could have just re-recorded, but it makes the most sense for me to actually learn, show you my mistake, and so you all can learn even deeper. I forgot to add the columns, so I need to specify the columns I'm actually going to extract the keys from, and that's going to be C, product A, and then product B. My apologies for making that mistake. Now this should work. Okay, so ideally this should be our long data frame. Okay, so we're going from our wide data format to our long data format so that we can actually compare across week and product regarding the cost, let's say. Okay, let's do it again. I think this time I won't make a mistake because I know what to do. And this makes sense. This should look like this. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do long event df, assign it. Okay, use pivot, not pivot, sorry, event df, and pipe this into pivot longer. We're doing this again, same one. Okay. Same idea, and then to remember, I'm gonna use columns. And the reason why I'm actually having the data, the reason why I'm using this format is so that's easier to read. Okay, so it's nice to keep it like that. But this time I'm gonna do things a little bit differently. I'm actually gonna use event. I'm writing out the event. I'm gonna copy this. Copy this. Event 1 to event 3. I can do that as well. And then that's another way of writing, specifying the actual columns I want to utilize. And then the name of the column of the actual variables. Now let's call it event and then values, let's call this time, and this should work. Okay, this should work, I hope. No, it won't work because I need, oh geez, not that. Run this, then run this, then look at that. So now we got our long data frame, so I can see how John's doing on average across all his trials. All right, we've done long to wide, wide to long, sorry. Now let's do long to wide. Okay, long to wide. So this employee data frame, I'm gonna clear this out. Hopefully you all are in practice of doing this, just clearing that out from time to time. So if you look at this employee, it's in a long format, and to get into a wide format, again, it's just pivot wider. We're so fortunate that we're not using the old mechanism. They had weird names. We have pivot wider, okay. And we're gonna take the employee. I'm gonna say wide. Employee DF, and then I'm going to take the employee DF, type this into pivot wider, and what I need is my IDs my ID calls to come from my employee ID, okay? That's going to be my rows. And then I'm going to need my names to come from department. They're going to come from rather than coming to. It's going to be coming from department. And then I'm going to need my values from salary. And I have to be honest, the actual examples that we're dealing with in class are very, very straightforward. In the traditional quarter, I would actually make it a little bit more complicated. And now we can actually have multiple columns that we're going to try to transform. But we're going to deal with simple cases just so that we can get a decent understanding on how these pivot wider and pivot longer actual functions work. So go ahead and run this. Okay, so pivot wide now, a wide employee data frame, will have a row for each of the employees. Okay, so now I can at least compare human resources versus IT. It could be the complaints. That's a lot of complaints. Or money. It's okay. You get the point. Okay, so let's do one more example. Why don't you pause this and try it on your own? Wouldn't that be fun? That's strange. Okay, let's create a new one. All right, so I'm going to do it now. So we have student, I'm going to say long. So look at when we run this, you can actually see that it's in the long format, okay? In that each observation represents a score, okay, on a particular assessment. That's indicative of, each, and you have a student ID, which it's indicative of, we should have a row representing a particular student, okay? So what we're going to do here is utilize this function, our pivot wider, wide underscore, got kind of lazy there, sorry about that, student, okay, okay, sorry about that, okay, student data frame, on pipe this into pivot wider or pivot longer. Pivot wider. Good job if you said that. I'm going to do my ID columns. I'm going to include two. So we're going to have the semester and student ID, identify the student, because we're not really doing much. The semester variable is not specifying any particular quantity. So we're just going to leave that as an identification column. So what we're going to do is just do, I'll make it a little sophisticated so you can have a little bit more sophisticated code. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't do it that because they're not next to each other. So student ID, comma, semester, and then you're going to have names from the subject, and then values from the score. Okay, so then that's it. So when I run this, I now have my wide student data frame with 2 students and their corresponding scores. Okay? Let's go. So next week, what we're going to do is go a little bit deeper with this data. Okay, with this these techniques. I'm going to introduce some more techniques as well. So look forward to going a little bit deeper into pivot longer and pivot wider next week.